Hello and welcome to our live telephone town hall meeting this evening. Thank you so much for being on this City of Mercer Island Teletown Hall. We'll be getting started in just a moment here. We're dialing out to thousands of your neighbors, and we appreciate those of you who dialed in early or those of you who joined quickly via our dial-out. I'll go ahead and tell you how you can participate in this live telephone town hall this evening. This is the City of Mercer Island's second telephone town hall. So tonight we'll be talking about the city's budget challenges and answering your questions. Many of you have already taken part in either our first virtual forum on this topic last year or in one of our community meetings. Today we'll have City Manager Julie Underwood and Finance Director Chip Corder give us a quick overview of the financial challenges faced by the City of Mercer Island, and then we'll be taking questions from you folks in our listening audience. So, as you listen, don't hesitate to press 0 on your phone to submit a question or a comment. You will have the opportunity to ask your question live in the forum, but if you prefer not to go live, you should still press 0 to submit your question, and then just let your operator know that you want the moderator to read your question instead of asking it live. Whatever is more comfortable for you. So again, you can press 0 to submit a question. So as you're listening to our update, be thinking about questions you'd like to submit and press 0 to submit your question. You'll have the opportunity to ask it live. If you prefer not to, you can just let your operator know that, and I'm happy to read it for you. So you can also visit the city website at mercergov.org. That's mercergov.org for more information. And from the home page, you can click on the Financial Challenges box on the right side of the page. But please do stay on the line so that we can get you updated and so that we can get your feedback. You will have the opportunity tonight to vote in a series of surveys using your phone. So even if you don't have a question or a comment to share during Q&A, please stay on the line and vote in our surveys throughout the forum. We really greatly appreciate and value any feedback you can give us during this live forum tonight. You may even want to grab a pen and paper to write down important information you hear. And again, you can press 0 on your phone at any time to submit a question for the Q&A segment of this live telephone town hall. And again, you can press 0 and submit that question and ask it live, or you can press 0 and submit your question and tell the operator you prefer to have me read it, whatever's more comfortable for you. One more thing before we get started. If you'd like to give us your email address to be updated as we move forward with the MI Weekly e-newsletter, please press 7 on your phone. We'll get your email address and we'll send you occasional updates. So again, that's 0 at any time to submit a question, 7 at any time to give us your email address to get the MI Weekly e-newsletter. And it's my pleasure to start this City of Mercer Island telephone town hall by turning it over to City Manager Julie Underwood. Go ahead, please, Julie.
Thanks, Ian. Hi, again, my name is Julie Underwood, City Manager for Mercer Island. I've been with Mercer Island since January of last year. I came from a city in California, but before that I was City Manager for Shoreline, Washington. My husband and I and our 3 boys are very excited to be back in the Northwest and to live and be part of this special community. I'd like to welcome you all to Mercer Island's second town hall. We tried this for the first time last fall and found it a great way to connect with a lot of residents in a way that's convenient for all of you. So we're excited to do it again. I'm joined tonight by our city's finance director, Chip Corder, as well as our fire and police chiefs and every department lead in the city. One of our mandates from our city council is to be good communicators and good listeners. And so that Islanders are really here to help shape how the city runs. We're excited to do all of that with you. We already know from surveying our community in the past that a strong majority of Islanders feel the city is doing a good job overall and a good or excellent job in using taxpayer dollars responsibly. We appreciate that endorsement and are working very hard to continue to earn that endorsement and to be responsive to you. The topic of tonight's forum is our city budget and why it's getting harder, more difficult to balance our budget and what we can do about it. This is a conversation we started in earnest last fall, and we've been out in the community meeting with as many groups as will have us and to talk about our projected budget deficits, why we don't have the revenues to sustain city services, and what we can do about it. You should have recently received a mailer from all of us with more details. In addition, I've been working with a group of 23 island residents, our community advisory group, and they've been really helpful in really diving into this problem, and they've been working with all of us since last year. and soon, in fact, next month, I anticipate a recommendation from them. So that's kind of a quick update on where we are with studying and evaluating this problem.
Great. Thanks so much, Julie. And for those of you who may have just joined us tonight, please do press 0 on your phone at any time if you have a question you'd like to submit, and we'll be taking your questions live. For those of you who already have, just sit tight and we'll be getting to Q&A in a moment here. In the meantime, let's go ahead and start our polling. We'll be doing this throughout the call, so just vote on your phone. We want to know how many of you have participated in some kind of forum talking about the city's budget challenges, whether it's a previous teletown hall or a community meeting or city presentation of some kind. So if you've participated in some meeting or forum or presentation, press 1 on your phone. If you have not yet participated in such a forum or presentation, please press 2. And if you don't know or you're not sure, please press 3. So go ahead and vote now. We'll have plenty more surveys, so please do stick around for that. And I'll turn it back over to Julie to take us on.
Thanks, Ian. I want to encourage all of you to please stay on the line. We are just getting into this topic. You don't have to be into budgets or finance to stay with us. Whether you depend on our police, fire services, our parks, trails, ball fields, recreation programs for kids, or street paving, or some of our amazing student and family programs offered by the city's Youth and Family Services Department, the city budget directly affects you and your family. And of course, as a taxpayer, it affects your pocketbook. With that, I'd like to ask our Finance Director, Chip Corder, to give a very brief, couple-minute overview of the budget problems our city is facing, and then we'll start taking questions.
Julie knows that asking me to describe the city's budget situation in just a few minutes is a tall order, but I'll do my best to boil things down to the essentials. To steal an oft-quoted line from Apollo 13, Houston, we have a problem. Starting next year, in 2019, we are projecting a $1.8 million operating deficit. That means our revenues are going to be $1.8 million short of what's needed to maintain the services currently provided by the city. That deficit is projected to grow every year up to almost $7 million, $6.8 million by 2024. What is driving these projected deficits? Simply put, annual revenue growth is not keeping pace with annual expense growth. Why not? Property taxes, which are the city's largest revenue source, are capped by state law at 1% growth per year. Expenses, on the other hand, are projected to grow between 4% and 5% per year, with inflation hitting 4% in December 2017 in the Seattle metro area. To maintain current service levels, a new ongoing revenue source is needed, such as a property tax levy lift, which would require voter approval. Otherwise, significant service level cuts will be required. I want to point out that Mercer Island isn't the only King County city facing budget challenges. Bellevue, Kirkland, Redmond, and Bothell are projecting operating deficits in 2019 or 2020 as well. As a result of the 1% property tax growth cap, many cities have gone or will need to go to their voters with a property tax levy lift to maintain current service levels. There are 4 facts I hope our residents will find useful as they try to digest this information and get more informed. First, our city's property tax rate is the lowest of any King County city with a population of 20,000 residents or more. As a result, a Mercer Island homeowner will pay less property tax to the city than any other homeowner in King County will pay to his or her city given the same assessed value. Second, compared to other full-service cities in King County, Mercer Island is one of the most leanly staffed relative to population. Third, the city has received clean audit opinions from the State Auditor's Office for the last 23 years, which is a good financial management indicator. And finally, fourth, the city has a AAA bond rating, which allows us to issue debt when necessary for capital projects at the lowest possible interest rates. All that said, we are still looking at budget forecasts with growing deficits, and we need to find an ongoing fix. Julie?
So I think it's important for us to stress that we are here because of Initiative 747, Tim Eyman's initiative, and I think a fun fact for all of you wondering out there, how did Mercer Island vote on this? Actually, Islanders voted that measure down. But nevertheless, the initiative only allows the city's levy amount to grow by 1%. I know that sounds counterintuitive, given that many of us are seeing our home assessed values increase by a lot more than 1%. But unfortunately, the city really doesn't have a great deal of revenue, and when 40% of our revenue is dependent on the property tax, that's why we're really here, contemplating with you the possibility of a property tax levy lid lift. So I know we want to get to some of your questions, so Ian, you want to take it away?
Sure thing, absolutely. And for those of you who may have joined us a little late, and for those of you still on the line, we encourage you to stick around to vote in some surveys. We're going to run some quick demographic polls just to get an idea of who's on the line, and then we'll be asking you some questions regarding your opinions around the budget problems and potential solutions. So our first survey question before we get to Q&A is, how long have you lived on Mercer Island? Press 1 if it's less than 5 years. Press 2 if it's 5 to 10 years. Press 3 if it's 11 to 20 years. And press 4 if it's 21 plus years. So again, how long have you lived on Mercer Island? Press 1 for less than 5 years, 2 for 5 to 10 years, 3 for 11 to 20, and 4 for 21 plus. And we have a question in from one of our web participants that we're going to start on. So for those of you who are participating on the web, you should see a leave a comment question button at the bottom right, and you can use that to submit questions from your webcast platform. We'll be reading some of those. For those of you on the phone, you can press 0 at any time to submit a question. You'll have the opportunity to come live with your question, but if you prefer not to, still press 0 and submit that question. Let your operator know that you prefer me to read it if that's your choice, whatever's more comfortable for you. So again, 0 for questions. And our first question comes from one of our web participants, and the question is there an exemption for seniors at present for the property tax? Who'd like to take that question on?
I'll have Chip.
Sure. Yes, there is an exemption. It's through King County, and it applies to seniors and people with disabilities and a few others. And the King County website has thresholds that apply to that. I think currently there are about 109 Mercer Island residents that receive either a partial or a full exemption, and so that is available.
I also want to point out, Ian, that again, another, I think, counterintuitive thing, that when you look at your property tax bill, Mercer Island is roughly about 10 to 12%, 12% of that total tax bill.
Got it. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Our next question is this. How has the city managed to balance the budget before, and why can't we keep doing that? Who's taking that one on?
Chip Corder, our finance director, will take that on.
I'll take that. It's a good question. It's one that I receive a lot, and it's through a number of things. So let's just look back the past 6 years. The number one thing that's made the biggest difference is development activity, which has been crazy from really 2014 through 17, extremely high, whether it's school district projects or town center projects or residential, extremely high. That generated really spikes in construction sales tax and development fees. And so we used those spikes, which generated surplus revenues, to help balance the budget over the last 3 biennia. I should also mention the council's done other things. They instituted a utility tax on the city's water, sewer, and stormwater utilities in 13 and increased the rate in 14. We benefited from low inflation. In 2013 through 2017, it was about 1.8% average annual inflation in the Salem metro area. Healthcare premiums we kept at 3.5% for the 13 through 17. And so it's just a lot of different things to kind of make it work. And we've kind of reached that point with development activity projected to decline, not fall off a cliff, but it's coming off its peaks in 16 and 17. That spiky revenue, if you will, is going away. And now we have a situation where expenditure growth is surpassing revenue growth.
Got it. Thank you very much, Chip. And thank you for that question. We'll be going to another question in just a second here, but let's run a couple of quick polls back to back here. How would you rate the quality of life on Mercer Island? Press 1 for excellent, press 2 for good, 3 for average, 4 for somewhat poor, and 5 for very poor. So again, how would you rate the quality of life on Mercer Island? 1 for excellent, 2 for good, 3 for average, 4 for somewhat poor, 5 for very poor. And I'll remind folks that you can also press 7 on your phone to give us your email address to get email updates from the city as we move forward through this process. Again, press 7 to give us your email address and get email updates. Let's go on to our next survey question. So your local city government provides a range of services such as fire, police, and emergency services, road upkeep and right-of-way maintenance, utility services, parks and recreation, youth and family support services, building, permitting, and oversight, and much more. So thinking about the level of service the city currently provides to our community, do you think it's press 1 for about the right amount of services, press 2 for not enough services, and press 3 for too many services? So again, thinking about the level of service the city currently provides to our community, do you think it's press 1 for about the right amount of services, press 2 for not enough services, and press 3 for too many services? And we're going to go ahead and take our first live question. This one's going to come from Tracy. Hey, Tracy, you're live on the line. Go ahead with your question, please.
Hi. I thought I heard that our current budget crisis was precipitated by I-747. My understanding is that our state Supreme Court overturned I-747 in 2007. So I'm wondering what has hampered our ability to balance the budget in the last 10 years, 11 years.
Sure. Just for everyone to have the background, actually voters did pass that in 2001. It was challenged, and it went to the state Supreme Court, and the court actually determined that was unconstitutional. However, the legislature did, in fact, pass a law making that really the law of the land. So while the Supreme Court did view that as unconstitutional, I think I could see why the legislature felt that they had to go down that road of enacting that when voters actually did pass it statewide.
Thank you so much, Julie. And thank you, Tracy. Appreciate you being on. Thanks so much for your question. A reminder, you can press 0 to submit a question. We're going to go to another live question from Cliff. First, we've got another survey question for you. Next survey question is this: how would you rate your satisfaction with city services? Press 1 if you're very satisfied. Press 2 if you're somewhat satisfied. 3 for somewhat dissatisfied. 4 for very dissatisfied. And 5 if you're not sure, you don't know. Again, how would you rate your satisfaction with city services? Press 1, very satisfied. 2, somewhat satisfied. 3, somewhat dissatisfied. 4, very dissatisfied. And 5 if you're not sure or you don't know. And while you vote on that, let's get Cliff up live next. Cliff, you're on. Go ahead, please, sir.
Hi. I was wondering, you had mentioned earlier that we had one of the lower tax rates in the area, if not the lowest, I think you might have said. But I was wondering if you could put that in context in terms of relative to, neighboring towns and cities, what's the range? And then kind of thinking ahead, also looking at potential tax rates in other states that both have and do not have income tax. Because I think that, I came from Texas where there was a much steeper property tax in the city of Austin, for example, and we didn't have income tax either. And so I've always been kind of amazed at actually how low our taxes are. So I was wondering if you could put that in some sort of context for everybody.
Sure. This is Chip Porter. I'll try to keep it as simple as possible. And what I do is when you look at the 20 or so cities in King County that are 20,000 or more population, each of those cities has its own levy rate. And that's just for the property taxes that go to the city. I'm not including school districts or the state or King County, et cetera. Just the city's levy rates in those. And then what I do is I take our median home value, which on the island is now $1.2 million in terms of assessed value. That's not market value, assessed value. You take that $1.2 million home and you apply it to all these cities. And so let me give you a sampling. Take Sammamish, which in many respects is very similar to Mercer Island. It's very residential, very small retail footprint. In Sammamish, a $1.2 million homeowner will pay almost $2,100, $2,077 to the city of Sammamish. Whereas in Mercer Island, the $1.2 million homeowner will pay $1,209. So there's one distinction. Let me just give you two other cities. Kirkland, a $1.2 million homeowner will pay $1,422 a year in property tax. Maple Valley will pay $1,248 for that $1.2 million homeowner. And so I'm not trying to say islanders are undertaxed. I'm simply trying to point that it is, you will pay less tax here. No matter what value of home you have, you take that same value and put it in any other city, you're paying less tax to the city.
Thank you so much, Chip. Appreciate that. And appreciate that question from Cliff. And as a reminder, everybody, you are on with City Manager Julie Underwood and Finance Director Chip Corder from the City of Mercer Island. They're here to answer your questions tonight. Many of you have already submitted some. We're going to be taking as many as we can in the time we have. For those of you who may have just joined, press 0 if you'd like to submit a question over the Our next question comes from our web simulcast from Jessica, who says, the recent budget presentation and mailer seem like you've already decided what can't be cut. How will you actually decide what to cut and what won't be cut? Who'd like to take Jessica's question?
Wow. That's a great question. So say that again. So we've already decided what can't be cut and what will be cut?
Right. So Jessica said she got the mailer you sent out, and it seems like you've already decided what cannot be cut. So she wants to know how will you actually decide what to cut and what won't be cut.
Yeah, so this is Julie Underwood, City Manager, and I'll probably tag team this with Chip. Lots of residents, when Chip and I have went to various meetings in the community, I mean, like League of Women Voters, and when we've gone to Aljoya and Covenant Shores and different meeting with different residents, they've really been very clear with us on we need to identify what services would be impacted. So in our mailer, and I really appreciate Jessica looking at that and reading that, and one of the things we wanted to point out are some of the types of services that we would be looking at. And typically what would happen is I would be working with my team. We would be developing a budget, which, by the way, we will balance. It has to be a balanced budget. And we would be making a recommendation that goes before the City Council on what services we would look at reducing or eliminating. So, again, because we have a revenue problem, we would be looking at having to look at reducing services of some kind. And we try to look at those services that are not mandated. Like, for example, we're mandated to provide municipal court services and provide jail services. And, of course, our residents really value public safety. So we have our fire department providing fire and EMT. We have our police department providing patrol services and detective services and school resource officer, emergency planning. So all of those things are high priority, and I would do my best to really, the chiefs would do their best to really sustain those services. But because we are projecting nearly $7 million over a 6-year period, roughly 25% of our $30 million general fund, I have to be honest, I can't promise that those services won't be touched at some point. However, I will say I will do everything in our power to sustain public safety as the number one services, but I think over time it will be very difficult not to look at that. So what we look at are things like, I think the things that really make our quality of life so wonderful. These are the things that, for example, why we made it into Money Magazine as the best place to live in the entire state of Washington. It's our farmers market, it's our summer celebration, it's really the things in our community that make it really special, and why residents really want to and choose to stay here. Our parks, we have almost 500 acres of both developed and undeveloped park space. We really do have a beautiful community, and it just would be really a choice of trying to really recommend services that are a lower priority or really things that are really nice to do and wonderful to do, but maybe are not really within our statutory requirement to provide.
Got it. Thank you so much, Julie, and thank you for the question. We're going to go to another question in just a moment, but I wanted to remind folks that if you would like to get email updates from the City of Mercer Island moving forward, please press 7 on your phone right now. Again, press 7 on your phone to get email updates. We've got lots of great questions, so we're going to keep trucking along. Our next one for you is, I heard that most of the city's expenses are on staff. Can we cut staff to balance the budget? Who'd like to take that one?
Yeah, so this is Julie again, and Chris Siegel, our HR director, is here as well. Just like our partner, the school district, I think their budget is roughly 80% personnel. Ours is about 70% personnel. Yes, what we're basically talking about when we are suggesting that we would reduce or eliminate services, we are talking personnel. We would be reducing our team, and that's just unfortunate. But it is the staff delivering the services, and if those services go away, in essence, they would go away. So, Chip?
Yeah, let me just add on to that to kind of broaden the perspective. When you look at our revenue growth, annual revenue growth, it's right around, projected to be 2.7%. That's pretty modest revenue growth, under 3%. Again, driven primarily by property tax. Expenditures, however, are in that 4 to 5% range. And yeah, you can cut expenditures, you can reduce services, but it honestly doesn't solve the problem. We'll just keep cutting. In fact, if you look at over a 6-year period, if we had to balance the budget simply on the expenditure side, by cutting expenditures, we'd have to eliminate 25% of our workforce. And I don't think that would sit well with the island. And oh, by the way, that still wouldn't solve the problem. You still would have to keep cutting thereafter. And so, boy, that's just a really hard nut to crack. It's not to say that expenditure reductions can't be part of the solution. It won't be a permanent. It won't be really an ongoing part of the solution. It just provides a temporary bridge.
Thank you, Chip, and thank you, Julie. Appreciate the answer. We're going to go to another live question in just a moment. We'll have some more survey questions coming up in just a minute where we're asking for your opinion on some of the solutions to this problem. So let's take a few more questions, and then we'll get to those polls, so we really appreciate you sticking around for that. And our next live question comes from Alex. Hey, Alex, you're on the line. Go ahead.
Hello. Actually, my earlier question was already answered, so I had a couple follow-up questions to what was just said about primarily about the staffing. So I heard 70% of costs go to staff, and if you cut 25%, that wouldn't solve the problem. Well, that's a 20% reduction in cost. That math doesn't seem to work out to me.
Yeah, this is hard to talk about over the phone. It's easier if I show you graphically. But boy, I'm not sure how to simplify it. Again, it just boils down to this ongoing compounding effect of annual revenue growth being roughly almost half of what expenditure growth is. And yeah, if we cut 25%, that would make a huge dent, but it wouldn't be a permanent solution. We'd have to keep cutting for a little bit longer. Because at the end of the day, you have to get that expenditure growth, you have to get it down to cut it in half, effectively, right? And that requires cutting a lot of employees to cut that annual growth number in half.
Got it. Thanks, Chip. Thank you, Alex. Let's get to our next live question right away. This one comes from Dwight. Hey, Dwight, you're up. Go ahead.
Yes, I was reviewing the third quarter financial update, and it shows that total resources have been growing very rapidly and have been since 2010, and the fact that they've exceeded the forecast. So I'm having a little trouble understanding where you think the shortfall is if we keep getting richer and richer and richer.
Well, if you're referring to the third quarter 2017, we actually ran a deficit when you compare ongoing revenues to ongoing expenditures. We had to use one-time money to actually bridge that deficit. And the one thing that may be giving you that impression of lots of resources is in 2017, the council decided to combine our criminal justice fund with the general fund. That moves some fund balance over to the general fund. And so that gives the appearance of there's being this huge chunk of change. And there is a chunk of change that got moved over, but we're using that chunk of change to help balance last year's budget and this year's budget. It's one-time money.
Got it. Thank you, Chip. Thank you very much, Dwight. Appreciate that question. Let's go right to our next one. This one comes from Meg. And Meg asked me to read this question. So her question is, why is the utility tax being used for other needs? Why is it being put into the general fund?
I think Chip can answer that question. We use basically, just the short answer is rates. So when I pay my water bill or sewer bill, those rates pay for that utility. So many cities have what's called a utility tax, and you see it on your cable bill, you see it on a lot of your bills, and we're allowed by state law to actually put a tax on that utility and to use that revenue for operating. So is that...
Yeah, a utility tax, it's always confusing. People think a utility tax stays with the utility. It doesn't. It's a utility tax on the utility bill, and it's a general purpose revenue. That's a legal term of art, just like property tax and sales tax. It goes to the general fund to fund general services.
Got it. Thank you very much. Appreciate the answer. And thank you so much, Meg. Thanks for submitting that question. We're going to take another question from our phone audience, and then we'll be running 2 survey questions now that you've got a stronger understanding of the situation that we're facing. So stick around for those polls, and we'll take our next question from Claudia. Hey, Claudia, you're live. Go ahead. Oh, actually, Claudia wanted hers read as well. So her question is, if you raised property taxes to keep current services, what is the percentage per $1,000? Who'd like to take Claudia's question?
The percent increase per 1,000, gosh, I don't know if we calculated it that way?
Off the top of my head, I have the rate per 1,000 assessed value, and it just depends on which scenario you pick, because we have a couple different levy-lift scenarios.
Yeah, the current rate, Claudia, is about $1. $1. So we're looking at $1 now, and I guess it's a question of...
And so if we did the levy-lift only at $331 a year, that's 27.5 cents per thousand. So you would say that's a 27.5% increase relative to the current year's levy. If you do the smaller levy-lift, which does some other revenues as well, that's $254 a year, and that's 21 cents per thousand assessed valuation. So that'd be a 21% increase.
Got it. Thank you very much. Appreciate that, Chip. And we're going to go to our next survey question. We're actually going to run 2 in a row here. What I'll be doing is I'll be reading a statement, and then I'll ask you to tell me whether you strongly agree, somewhat disagree, or strongly disagree with that statement. So the statement is, I would be in favor of raising Mercer Island's property tax rate above the 1% cap in order to maintain city services at current levels. Press 1 if you strongly agree. Press 2 if you somewhat agree. Press 3 if you somewhat disagree, 4 if you strongly disagree, and 5 if you're not sure or don't know. Again, the statement is, I would be in favor of raising Mercer Island's property tax above the 1% cap in order to maintain city services at current levels. Press 1 for strongly agree, 2 for somewhat agree, 3 for somewhat disagree, 4 for strongly disagree, and 5 if you're not sure or you don't know. I'll give you a moment to vote on that and remind folks you can press 0 to submit a question. We do have a few folks still waiting in line, but we'd like to have everybody submit their questions, and we'll be taking as many as we can in the remaining 25 minutes we have in this forum. And we thank everybody who pressed 7 to submit their email address, and we collected all those. If you haven't had a chance to give us your email address to get updates as we move forward, please press 7 on your phone now. Our next survey question is the same, where I'll read a statement and then ask if you agree or disagree. I would prefer to see the city cut services and programs rather than ask for an increase in property taxes. Press 1 if you strongly agree with that statement, 2 if you somewhat agree, 3 if you somewhat disagree, 4 if you strongly disagree, and 5 if you're not sure or don't know. Again, the statement is, I would prefer to see the city cut services and programs rather than ask for an increase in property taxes. Press 1 if you strongly agree, 2 if you somewhat agree with that statement, 3 if you somewhat disagree, 4 if you strongly disagree, and 5 if you're not sure or you don't know. And as you finish voting on that, let's take our next question from our live audience. This one comes from Bernard. You're live, Bernard. Go ahead, please, sir.
Yes. What I heard was that you kept taking one-time revenue from like development fees and using it to cover ongoing expenses. It's bad business.
I agree.
You have no reason to expect continuity from that for that revenue. You basically, it should have been earmarked towards specific infrastructure things that the developers were paying for. So, and I understand it's not the staff is on the phone, but also the city council has to be blamed for, let's say, going beyond its income. That's it.
Yeah, it's not a best practice, and to rely on one-time revenues to help balance the budget for the last 3 bienniums, that's not a good practice.
Got it. Thank you, Bernard. Appreciate that. Let's go to our next live question. We have this one from Judith. Hey, Judith, you're live on the line. Go ahead.
Yes. Instead of cutting services and all, you have a big undeveloped part of the town center that is not being developed because the codes have been onerous to developers. Hines tried to build a project. Vulcan, Paul Allen's company, came in. Alliance was the latest. They cannot, with the onerous codes of doors in every 60 feet, 10% low-income housing, the wetting tier effect of the 3rd and 4th floors of a building, and the plazas that are required make the situation unbuildable to make a profit. And this has devalued the property in your town center to where the value per square foot is considerably less than the outlying areas that now have 5-story buildings on them. It would be a suggestion that you reduce the onerous codes and make them more acceptable to developers to build something nice instead of leaving those ugly buildings that we now have in the town center.
Julie, you want to take
wow.
that one?
I don't know how to respond to that, Judith. That is, I think you're referring to the town center, really the town center development codes that the council enacted back in 2016. That's a legislative council action, and I think if your point is to say, could the city rely on more economic development to help ourselves out of this situation, I think that would be a challenge, even if those codes were, I think, as you pointed out, less onerous, because our town center is really very small. We are really a residential community, and we just don't have the land area or the zoning for some significant commercial development that would be to grow our way out of it. When I worked for the city of Shoreline, we were fortunate we had a Costco, and that Costco generated for the city $1.5 million of sales tax revenue. Thank goodness that city had that revenue. But we don't have the land area, we don't have the zoning for that, and I think a lot of us, myself included, really get to enjoy not having the traffic impacts that come with having those large scale developments. That being said, I think we would all benefit from a town center that is something that the community really can enjoy, whether it's going out for their own dining and entertainment purposes, all kinds of reasons why you would want to have a really vibrant town center. But I think it would probably be unrealistic, frankly, to say we could grow ourselves out of this through economic development just because of the way we've planned our community and the way we've developed.
I'll just add to that real quickly. It is true to say that from a purely financial perspective, looking at that narrow perspective, yes, the changes that have been made to the town center have made it less financially attractive for developers to do something there. I would definitely agree with you.
Great.
Yeah, and I know one of the other things, I think we put this in the mailer, but I want to point out that our council wanted us to also work with our community advisory group to talk about some of the city's capital needs, and there are a lot of them. I think certainly more of our athletic community would love to see more field turf on our grass fields. We get lots and lots of feedback about bike lanes through our arterials and collector streets and that sort of thing. They'd love to see, obviously, improved access, safe routes to school, lots and lots of improvements. We've tried our best to use one-time money to offset those, but as you can imagine, the needs are pretty vast, and so I wanted to make sure you're aware that's something the city is looking at as well. But again, I think first and foremost focused on the city's operating needs.
Great. Thank you very much, Chip. Thank you, Julie. And appreciate that question. Thank you so much. We're going to be going to our next live question right away. We have Michael on the phone. Hey, Michael, you're up. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you for the call, and thank you for this town hall meeting. I'm actually enthused that we're doing this. My question is rather pointed. Is there assets that that Mercer Island owns that are either underperforming or are available to be sold? My pointed question is more about Mary Waite Pool. Is that pulling its weight? Every time I go by Mary Waite Pool and they're having a grand swim meet, cars are parked everywhere, and I know that 95% of the people don't even live on Mercer Island that are going to it. So my question is Mary Waite Pool still viable for the city?
That's a great question, and actually, I think, speaking as your city manager, I'm very, very happy we don't operate the swimming pool. Actually, this is a operation that is really the responsibility of the school district. And in fact, I think in their recent capital levy, they included some funds to improve and to really improve the life cycle of the pool. So it's there. We do provide a very modest contribution to operating the pool. I think it's $135,000, so very, very modest. Having run pools in the past, I think I've seen, trying to recall when we ran a pool in the city of Shoreline, I think it was about $500,000 or so to run that pool. So very happy we don't have to operate the pool. It is pretty expensive, and it's never an operation that really makes enough revenue to fund itself. So thankfully we don't have that problem.
Thank you so much, and thank you, Michael. Appreciate you submitting that question.
Thank you, Michael.
Yeah, appreciate the kind comment as well, Michael. Thanks for participating. Let's go to Gordon live next, and we'll be running another survey question. Gordon, you're live. Go ahead.
Yeah, hi, good evening. I have a question. Is the proposed tax services are provided on a per capita or per household basis. So would the proposed tax be distributed evenly amongst all the households on Mercer Island, or would you then tie it to the property value, the assessed property value, which seems as though it would unfairly penalize those residents of Mercer Island who may have lived here the longest and as a result had their property values increase, but not necessarily be utilizing any more services than anyone else, and in fact maybe using less services?
Yeah, property tax is not, there is no perfectly equitable revenue source that's out there, and property tax certainly is not that. The way it's set up is the higher your assessed value is, you're paying more for that service, whether you use it or not, and it's, unfortunately, the city has absolutely no control over that particular formula. It's set up that way many, many years ago. But yes, but on the flip side, the lower your assessed value, you're paying less correspondingly.
Thank you, Chip. And thank you, Gordon. Appreciate you being on. Thanks so much for your question. We're going to go to another survey question, and we'll be taking Joan live on the phone. Next question is, do you think the city should hold more telephone town halls in the future to talk with residents about important issues? Press 1, yes, the city should continue holding teletown halls. Press 2 for no, the city shouldn't hold more teletown halls. Or press 3 for don't know or you're not sure. Again, should the city continue holding telephone town halls in the future to talk with residents about important issues? Press 1 for yes, 2 for no, 3 if you don't know or aren't sure, and Joan is our next live caller. Hey, Joan, you're up. Go ahead.
Oh, Joan Bellotti? Is that the right Joan?
Yep, you're up.
Oh, okay, hey. All righty. So my question is that last year we all came together because WashDOT and Sound Transit were going to be blocking one of our exits off of Island Crest. And we talked about how we were going to need $1 million to at least initiate a lawsuit with legal assistance, and that maybe it was going to impair some of the turf fields monies. But maybe we should have known at that time that we could go bankrupt, or we were going to have some serious financial repercussions from this, and it was not mentioned at all.
Well, thanks, Joan. We have been talking to our city council about the city's financial challenges, I think as early as 2013 and 2014, and we also found a way to fund the lawsuit that we entered into against Sound Transit, and so we're using some utility taxes to pay for that lawsuit. And just as a reminder for those who are tracking this issue, we paid, I guess, about just under $2 million for that lawsuit, and we were able to settle for $10 million. So unfortunately, we can't use that money to operate the budget, but we can use that money to offset the impacts to losing the center roadway, and as you mentioned, losing Island Crestway on-ramp for single-occupant vehicles. And we are doing a number of traffic mitigation projects to mitigate that. And then we also have some funding in there for parking. A lot of our residents have expressed a desire to access transit, and recognizing that the Sound Transit park and ride fills up early, 7 a.m. roughly, and so we're looking at using that money also for parking. But unfortunately, it isn't something we can use to address the operating budget. Let me just say, we're not going to go bankrupt. Let me be clear. We're not going to go bankrupt. We are working in advance with our community to address the problem, and I think for me, it has to be a balanced budget. We're not gonna deliver services on credit cards, on debt, or anything like that. It will be a balanced budget. But I do feel like I have to be very honest with our community that if we are looking at balancing the budget because we don't have revenues to sustain our services, I need to be frank with you, I need to be open with you and communicate what services we would be looking at reducing. And so we're not a city that provides a great deal of services like some neighboring communities. I mean, some communities provide a lot more than what we do, but the little services we do provide that our community enjoys would be impacted. So not going bankrupt.
Got it. Thank you very much, Julie. And thanks for that question. We're going to go to our next survey question, and you'll be able to vote on this again on your phone. I wanted to remind you that if you wanted to give us your email address to get email updates, please press 7 on your phone. We've got about 10 minutes left, and you won't be able to give us that email over the phone after we close out the call, but you can still register your email address on the website. So again, press 7 if you'd like to give us your email address during this phone call so that we can keep you updated. We'll be taking our next question from Tony. In the meantime, our next survey question is this. If the city's revenue shortfall resulted in service cuts, they would likely fall squarely on non-essential quality of life services, namely parks and recreation and school mental health counselors in the Youth and Family Services Department. Now, we want you to press 1 if you strongly agree with that approach, press 2 if you somewhat agree with that approach, press 3 if you somewhat disagree with that approach, 4 if you strongly disagree with that approach, and 5 if you don't know or aren't sure. I'll read it again. If the city's revenue shortfall resulted in service cuts, they would likely fall squarely on non-essential quality of life services. So press 1 if you strongly agree with that approach, press 2 if you somewhat agree with that approach, press 3 if you somewhat disagree, 4 if you strongly disagree, and if you don't know or aren't sure, press 5. Will you vote on that? Let's get our next live question up. This one comes from Tony. Hey, Tony, you're live. Go ahead, please.
Hi, I was just wondering, I know the city people have been meeting with the Citizens Advisory Group, and I just wondered if they've come up with any other ideas besides this levy lid lift.
Yes, Tony, thank you very much. Actually, we have learned a lot from our community, and I'm not surprised. They have really, I think, pushed us to think of other things. A couple things that they had us think through are the B&O, so business and occupant tax, considering raising that tax from
0.1% to 0.15%.
0.1% to 0.15%, and that would raise some revenue. Another idea came from sustaining the utility tax. Another idea that I think is really clever is, I don't know if you all know, but our thrift store funds our youth and family services, and the notion behind that is if we could pay for a renovation and expansion of the thrift store, actually that can generate income, and the hope there is that we would then be able to really have our youth and family services. So that's our counseling services, our food pantry, our emergency services. That could be possibly fully funded by our thrift store revenue, and thankfully, I shout out to our Youth and Family Services Foundation Board, who funds 10% of that budget. Anyway, we think that's another creative idea from our Community Advisory Group. Am I missing any others, Chip? I mean, there were a lot of creative things.
There was the one REIT option.
REIT, looking at
That's real estate excise tax.
Should we adjust how we collect that revenue? So really a lot of great ideas. So, Tony, thanks for that question. And thank you to our CAG members who have volunteered so much time to helping the city solve this problem.
Yeah, thank you so much, Tony. Really appreciate you being on. Let's go to our next live question. We have Phil on the line next. Hey, Phil, you're up. Go ahead.
Yeah, you had mentioned that there was a one-time revenue starting back in 2014. And so my question is, what programs have been initiated or increased since 2014?
What?
Let's see. Well, this is Chip. I'll take a quick swing at it. I'll try to give you the short version. So that's when development activity really started picking up, and so we did hire more development services staff, but that is fully funded by permit fees, not by taxes. So there's a direct relationship there between development activity and staffing level and development services. In terms of tax-funded services, I cannot think of an example. Any kind of additions that happened between 13 and 17 represented restorations of positions that were cut during the Great Recession. We did some utility positions.
I'm recalling arborist. Didn't we restore that to?
That wasn't a restoration.
No.
The right-of-way position, you mean? Yes.
Yeah. So half-time right-of-way. We've received a lot of complaints about the trees in the right-of-way, so we brought an arborist on board to help us assess our tree canopy in the right-of-way. Any other?
There are examples where we took, I think of parks maintenance, where we had some 4 and 9 month seasonal positions, and we were having a hard time keeping them filled. So it was creating a level of service and just a staffing stability problem. So we converted them to 2 regular FTEs. That was a cost-neutral proposition that solved our staff stability problem, and also just dealt with the service level issue that we were having. as well. And so that's just a quick sampling of kind of things that have done. But in terms of actual using property tax or sales tax, no, that has not been the case. There have been other revenue sources or converting, temporary positions to regular positions, or even converting, in some cases, some contracted services to positions that we could do more efficiently and more cheaply in-house.
Great. Thank you so much, Chip and Julie. And thank you very much, Phil. Really appreciate you being on. Thanks so much for your question. We're going to run another survey question for you now. It's another statement, and you'll tell us whether you agree or disagree. So, I found tonight's telephone town hall to be useful in helping me learn about the city's budget situation. Press 1 if you strongly agree with that statement. 2 if you somewhat agree. 3 if you somewhat disagree. 4 if you strongly disagree. And 5 if you're not sure or you don't know. Again, the statement is, I found tonight's telephone town hall to be useful in helping me learn about the city's budget situation. Press 1 if you strongly agree. 2 if you somewhat agree. 3 if you somewhat disagree. 4 if you strongly disagree, and 5 if you don't know or you're unsure. So we've just about gotten to the end of our live teletown hall. We've just got about a few minutes left, and I'll give Julie and Chip in a moment to make some closing comments. But I wanted to let everybody know that if you have any additional thoughts, questions, or comments, you feel like we didn't get to you, or you have some a suggestion, or you need somebody with the city to get back to you, you can stay on the line as we close out this call in a few minutes, and you'll have the opportunity to leave us a voicemail message just by staying on the phone. Now, if you need somebody to get back to you, we'd like you to leave your message and also your name and your phone number so that we can reach back out to you. But again, please do stay on the line if you have any voicemails to leave for us with additional thoughts, questions, comments, or potential solutions. We'd love to hear from you. And with that, let me turn it back over to Julie and Chip to take us to the close.
Thanks, Ian, and I want to thank everyone for staying with us and really taking the time to learn about our structural imbalance, our deficits, and, of course, some of the possible solutions that are out there to address the problems. I will be, on May 15th, I will be actually sharing with the City Council the Community Advisory Group's recommendation. We are also planning to administer a representative scientific citizen survey, and I will also plan to really distribute the results also on May 15th. And then the council will really, at that time, start to deliberate and discuss all the potential options, and we're hoping that they'll make a decision on this before the end of June. And so the council will be very interested in getting your input on what ways you think we should balance the budget. So be sure to reach out to us, watch our council meetings. You can stream them online, or please attend in person. Again, they're very interested in listening to the feedback you have on how to address our financial challenges. So again, want to thank you all for participating, and by all means, reach out to us if you have any other follow-up questions.
Thanks so much, everybody. Have a great night.